Again, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining. My name is Yenting Liu. I am Program Manager at BraveStep. So excited to see all of you here with us today. For those of you who joined us last week for the Rooted in Resilience that we did with Brittany Fuller, welcome back. For those of you who are new to our series, welcome. Today's topic is on reclaiming intimacy, navigating sexuality after trauma. So I'm personally very excited for this topic. It's actually a new topic for me. So excited to learn from the beautiful Ceara Corry as part of our Lunch and Learn series that we are doing for Brave Steps Color Blue campaign. For those of you who are not familiar with the Color Blue campaign, this is in collaboration or in conjunction with the Sexual Assault Awareness Month and the Child Abuse Awareness Month. We are doing a lot of different activities that I'll share in the next slide. But I do want to mention, I forgot to mention that Brave Step, if you are not familiar with our mission, we are a nonprofit organization. We are based in Charlotte, North Carolina. And what we do is we empower individuals who've been impacted by sexual violence. So I know usually people think of the survivors, but we also have programs for loved ones and change makers, allies as well. So if you are interested in learning more, you can go to our website, bravestep.org, and you can check us out. So I did mention our Color It Blue campaign. Go to the next slide. There it goes. So this is exciting. It's a fun way to get involved. I painted my nails. I thought it was like blue, light blue, like Carolina blue, but it turned out teal. But this is my way of participating, right? So that's a small way of just joining the movement. But there are many different ways. We have a toolkit of all different ways that you can get involved, including like a virtual run. You can make ribbons. You can dye your hair. A couple years back, I did blue hair extensions, which was really cool. I know some people have like blue fairy hair, so just fun different ways to join the movement. Um, if you are interested in learning more and figuring out ways to participate, you can go to our website. Again, it's the same, bracebit.org/color it blue. All right, well, that is it for me. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to while you're reading here and send it over to Ceara.
Wonderful. Good afternoon, everyone. Happy Friday. It is lovely to see you all here. I'm excited for the conversation that we're going to have this afternoon. Oops, sorry. There we go. I'm excited for the conversation we're going to have this afternoon. And I do want to let you all know we will mostly use the chat for our conversation as I'm sharing, but there will be a couple of points where I pause to just kind of check in or take some thoughts or questions where you will be free to unmute yourself. But if you have a thought or question while I am actively sharing, go ahead and feel free to put that in the chat, and I will be able to answer those questions when we kind of pause to check in as well. Here is just a little roadmap for where we're headed this afternoon. So I'll tell you a little bit more about myself and the work that I do. We'll talk about trauma and the impact that trauma has, and then get into maybe the bulk of why you're here, reclaiming intimacy, how to navigate sexuality and relationships after trauma. So I always like to give folks just a little heads up about where our conversation is headed. So here is a little bit about me. Again, my name is Ceara Corry. I am a licensed clinical social worker. I'm licensed to practice in North Carolina and South Carolina. I received first a bachelor's of social work from UNC Charlotte, and then a master's of social work and master's of public administration from UNC Chapel Hill. I thought I wanted to go into nonprofit management until I took a nonprofit management class and then said, maybe not. Um, and I'm fortunate enough to have discovered that my passion is helping individuals and couples create the life, relationship, and sex life of their dreams. And so that is what I do day in and day out as a sex therapist and educator. I am also a sexual violence survivor, which is a huge part of why this work is so important to me and why I'm so excited to be here. Here's some contact information for me. So my website, my email, my social media, I make it really easy for folks. And I also host a podcast called From the Heart Side Out. We release episodes almost every Wednesday. The goal is every Wednesday when I'm not having technical or other complications. So feel free to check that out as well. And yeah, if there are any questions that y'all have about me or about my work that are things that would be helpful to know, feel free to ask. You can drop those in the chat as well. And then before we dive into the meat of why we're here today, I did just want to offer a reminder to take care of yourself throughout this conversation. These topics can be difficult. It can bring up a lot of difficult thoughts, feelings, emotions, those sorts of things. And so I wholeheartedly encourage you to take care of yourself however you need to, whether that means keeping your camera off, or you may need to step away for some water or just to do some deep breathing. You may say, you know what, I'm not in the right headspace to participate in this conversation today. I'm just going to wait for the recording. That is fine as well. Please, please, please take care of yourself however you need to. I know we may have folks here who are survivors, who work with survivors, who have survivors as partners, or any combination of those things. And so, again, take care of yourself however you need to do that. So, if we're talking about trauma and the impact that trauma has on sex and relationships, I first thought it was really important to make sure we have an understanding of what trauma is. What does that mean? Because with the rise of social media, people can say all types of words and give all type of definitions that are not necessarily accurate. So this is an explanation of trauma that I find really helpful. It's a person's experience of emotional distress resulting from an event that overwhelms the capacity to emotionally digest it. And so it's less about the event in itself and more about the impact that that event has had on you. So trauma can arise from a variety of events. It could be car accidents, it could be house fires, natural disasters, some form of abuse or neglect, or any combination of these experiences. Because again, it's not about the event itself, it's about the impact of it. So two people can experience the exact same event, and one person may walk away feeling traumatized from that, and the other person may not, simply because it is about the emotional distress or the impact that that event has had on someone. So I'd like to be clear about what we're talking about when we're talking about trauma. I also think it's imperative to talk about what is happening biologically, what is happening, especially in our brain, when we experience some sort of trauma, how this impacts us. So I'm gonna nerd out on this for just a little bit, so bear with me. Our brains develop from the bottom up. The first part of your brain that develops is what's called the limbic system. This is the part of your brain that's responsible for all of those automatic processes, the things that we don't have to think about. Regulating your temperature, breathing, keeping your heart beating, all of those things that are essential to our survival and could be really dangerous if we had to think about every single breath before we took it. That would not help us stay alive very long. So this part of your brain, one key component that exists in that system is the amygdala. You can think of this as the alarm system in your brain. This is the part of your brain that alerts you to some sort of danger or some sort of threat. The primary goal of the amygdala is to keep you alive. Everything is secondary to that goal of keeping you alive. So the more hyperactive the amygdala is, there's more evidence that there are more signs of like post-traumatic stress disorder, or that someone has experienced significant trauma that has made it difficult for their amygdala to kind of turn off. It's learned that it needs to be on high alert, especially if someone has experienced some type of prolonged or repeated trauma like abuse, something of that sort. So we also have the hippocampus, which is more in the central part of your brain here. This is the part that is responsible for creating memories and storing memories, helping us differentiate between what's happening right now versus what happened 10 minutes ago, 10 years ago, 6 months ago, distinguishing between past and present. its goal when we're talking about trauma is to remember dangerous situations so that the next time you encounter a situation like that, you know how to respond, you know that it's dangerous, you know what to do. It helps you kind of make sense of the traumatic experience that you've had. What's really important here is that with constant or repeated exposure to trauma, this part of your brain actually shrinks. And so its ability to do its job is literally changed by experiencing trauma. So then we get to the front part of your brain here, this prefrontal cortex. This is the part that's responsible for rational thinking, regulating those emotions. This is the part that helps us understand nuance and complexities and, again, be able to rationalize. This part of your brain also is reduced in size as a result of repeated exposure to trauma. So it's important to understand that experiencing trauma, especially prolonged or repeated trauma, literally impacts how your brain works. It impacts your brain's ability to do its job. It reduces your ability to be able to think logically and rationally, that sort of thing, because that alarm system is constantly activated or turned on to say, we are still in danger. We don't have time to think about the weather and what we want to do next month because we need to get away from the danger that we are still currently in. So what this looks like is you may encounter some sort of stimulus. It could be a dog, it could be chocolate, it could be someone with outstretched hands coming towards you. And your brain has to decide very quickly because, again, the first and primary goal is survival. It's keeping you alive. So your brain has to respond very quickly. Is this safe or is this a danger? Those are the only options. Is this dog making this facial expression because this picture was taken mid-bite of food or because this dog wants to rip my face off? That is what your brain is trying to decide. Is this actually chocolate that I love and enjoy, or is it poisonous? Is this person coming to stop me from walking into a hole, or are they coming to shove me off the side of the road? Your brain has to make this decision very quickly. It's safe or it's not. Because again, that lower part of your brain, that survival part of your brain, only sees those two options. It's safe or it's not. It's not focused on nuance and complexities or any of those sorts. So if your brain decides this is a threat, this is a danger, the amygdala sounds the alarm, activates your stress response, and that stress response could look like any one of these. These are the 5 that are most common or that we, know the most about right now. I feel like when I first started learning about these things, there were 3. It was fight, flight, freeze. And then eventually I heard about fawn. And then in maybe the last year or 2, I started hearing more about flop as well. So if you're like, I didn't even know that there were 5, you are not alone in that. So fight is, okay, your brain says this is a threat, this is a danger, and it tells your body, your emotions, we are going to stay and fend off whatever this danger may be. Again, whether it's the chocolate, the dog, or the person. Sometimes or for some folks, your brain may say, flight. We need to get as far away from this danger as possible, as far away and as quickly as possible. So that may be running, it may be hiding, it may be backing away, those sorts of things. There's freeze. Your brain decides the best thing, the safest thing, the best way to assure our survival is to just stop, to go still, to go tense. Let's be silent. Maybe it's kind of like, if I'm still enough, maybe they can't see me. Maybe the threat will go away and will ignore me. And then flop is similar to freezing, except your body, your muscles actually become limp. You may literally flop or faint. So if you think about animals like possums that are known for playing dead to distract or mislead predators, it's the same thing. As humans, we can have a similar response that the best way to protect myself, the best way to stay safe is to completely freeze and go limp. Because again, maybe the dog that's a threat realizes, oh, this person isn't a threat anymore. And so they go on about their business. That's what your brain is hoping for. And then there's fond. I've also seen this called friend lately, that the idea or the goal is to befriend or placate someone or placate a threat, kind of negotiating, bribing, or pleading for your safety and survival. This may be I'm going to toss some steak in this direction and hope that the dog runs over there and leaves me alone, right? Like, just for example. So fight, flight, freeze, flop, and fawn. These are kind of those most common ways that your brain reacts or responds to what it has perceived as a danger. So the amygdala sounds the alarm and says, hey, activate the stress response. And the hippocampus, which we also know is involved in responding to trauma, again, its job is to store those memories so that we remember, hey, that's not really chocolate, or that dog or that facial expression is actually very dangerous. And here's where we can see the development of what we call triggers. I'm really big on definitions because social media sometimes can make it seem like anything you don't like is triggering, and that's not necessarily the case. So when we're talking about trauma, a trigger is anything that reminds a person of a past traumatic event and causes a strong emotional or physical reaction. So it could be colors, it could be locations, it could be sensory information, smells, taste, because your body is using all of that, your brain is using all of that information to determine, is this a threat or not? It could be clothing, whether clothing that you're wearing or that another person is wearing. Anything that is connected to a traumatic event could become a trigger. And when that happens, anything that resembles that initial threat is also perceived as a threat. So we have our original kind of stimulus here. This dog with this particular facial expression, maybe all small dogs are dangerous, or all dogs this color are dangerous, or maybe all dogs, period, are dangerous, because your brain associates this size and shape of animal as dangerous. That's its job, to be able to recognize danger very quickly in similar situations. We're looking at this chocolate. If your brain has decided, I don't know that that's really chocolate, I don't know that that's really safe, anything that resembles chocolate or contains chocolate or smells like chocolate could become a trigger, could become something that your brain also associates with danger. Same with the hands example. It's like, is anybody reaching towards me safe? Is this a handshake? Is this a trick? Are you here to harm me? Because your brain is trying to make these decisions very quickly. Again, especially if we've experienced repeated or prolonged trauma, it's very difficult to get this event processed in that prefrontal cortex, the part that can understand nuance and can realize, hey, maybe that dog was a little aggressive, but not all dogs are. And maybe that wasn't really chocolate, but there is a such thing as chocolate in the world that I enjoy. But we can't get there if that alarm system is kind of stuck in the on position. So before we pause or check in, I'm going to do a little pop quiz. So feel free to use the chat. It's going to be 2 true or false questions. And I want to hear your thoughts on if you think these statements are true or false or not. So the first one, true or false? When encountering a stressful situation, you can choose your stress response. You can choose fight, flight, freeze, those sorts of things. What do y'all think? I see some responses coming in. I think I see all false so far. All right, let's see. Absolutely false. Y'all are correct. Your brain makes a split-second decision about what is the best course of action to keep you safe. It is not considering your emotions. It is not considering, am I going to feel awkward about this later if I run away and this actually wasn't a scary situation? It doesn't care about anything, any of those things. It looks at the sensory information, the context that you're in, and says, is this safe or is this a danger? I've had folks sometimes feel really frustrated with themselves because of how they responded to a particular situation. Why did I freeze? Why didn't I run away? Why didn't I say no? Why didn't I try to fight back? It's like, I just gave up and let this happen. And they can feel so frustrated. And I'm like, because this wasn't a conscious choice. That limbic system, your amygdala did not say, hey, Ceara, how do you want to handle this? What are you thinking? Tell me your ideas. I'll tell you my ideas. We'll negotiate this back and forth. We'll figure it out. No, it made a decision on what it felt was the best course of action to keep you safe. All right, next one. Y'all did great with that one. Let's see about this one. So, true or false? A physical or literal threat are the same as emotional or perceived threats to your brain. What do y'all think? Does your brain think of these the same? Does it make a distinction between these? Y'all are good at this. I'm seeing lots of truths in the chat, and that is absolutely correct. That is true. Your brain does not make this distinction. Rejection, abandonment, disappointment, someone not being able to come to your birthday dinner and your feelings being hurt about that can feel the same to your brain as you being chased by a bear. Your brain is like, oh, this is dangerous. Those emotional wounds, those emotional trauma, it's all the same to your brain. It's not making a distinction. Again, I've had folks who like, I just don't know why I reacted that way, or I made that big deal out of nothing. It wasn't that serious. It's not like I was actually in any danger. And I'm like, yes, you know that logically. But again, logic is the last step when we encounter some sort of threat or stressful situation. I was going to do a couple of more slides before I check in for questions, but I'll pause really quick just to check the chat. I don't think I've seen any questions in the chat. If you haven't had a chance to drop your question in, feel free to go ahead and do that. And maybe I'll keep going for now since I don't see any questions. It's like 2 more slides before we check in. All right. So when we're talking about trauma and sexuality or the impact that trauma can have on sexuality in relationships, it can show up a lot of different ways and it looks different for different people. So some of the things that we found, not only in my practice, but just in research in general, some folks experience hyper or hyposexuality. Hyper meaning it's subjective. This is my school of thought that it's subjective, that there is no universal baseline for how much sex someone should be happening that or should be having to say that someone else is hyper or hyposexual, but maybe being more sexually active than they used to be or than they want to be or intend to be. That may be a way that they're trying to make sense of their experiences. For some people, they go in the opposite direction and they become less sexual than they typically would be. A variety of emotions such as guilt, shame, disgust, anger, fear, anxiety, all of these sorts of worries can result as well. And that can show up in your relationships. It can make it difficult for you to build trust or build relationships with someone. You may feel that it's better or safer to isolate yourself or to be alone because I'm damaged. I'm not a good person. I'm not a good partner. How is anyone going to accept this about me? Which also can lead to some of that internalized oppression, like internalized misogyny or homophobia. Like, well, if I hadn't been wearing that dress, or if I didn't go to that place, or that's what I get for going out by myself, or that's what I get for wanting to be sexually liberated. This is the situation that I've now gotten myself in. Those sorts of things, like just internalizing some of those messages, or this is my punishment for being queer, or whatever the case might be. Uncertainty about yourself or your experiences. Some of what I've heard folks kind of navigating or exploring is this sex act that I've come to enjoy is related to my sexual trauma, or that's the first time I experienced this. Do I really like this, or am I just playing out my sexual trauma? And folks can find it really difficult or really struggle with that uncertainty when it comes to understanding themselves or their experiences. It may also look like, again, the fear or the avoidance of sex, that sex inherently becomes dangerous. Anything related to sex now serves as a trigger or a reminder of previous trauma. Sometimes folks experience flashbacks or freezing or notice that they dissociate or disconnect during sex. They may be triggered during sex. Um, Feeling a disconnection from pleasure, having a hard time knowing what do I like, what do I enjoy, what feels good for me, and just having difficulty really connecting to that or naming that for themselves. Sometimes folks notice that they experience pain during sex, or they can have sex without pain, but they're unable to reach orgasm or haven't ever been able to have an orgasm because being mentally and emotionally present during sex is really important for experiencing orgasms. And so if you're struggling with that, it can lead to orgasmic challenges as well. Sometimes folks struggle with culture or religious messages about sex or about trauma that, you know, I've heard it all from like this is you brought this on yourself. If you were living better, then this would have never happened to you. This is your punishment for something. And I've seen people really wrestling with this is what I've been taught. This is what I've been told. I don't think I believe it, but it's also all that I know. So trauma can impact multiple areas of your life and your relationship. So I'm going to pause here just to, again, check in for thoughts or questions. And I did see one in the chat. It says, I know logically an experience is not a threat, but my body and mind reacts differently. How do I train my body and mind to react logically? Absolutely. So this is the work of navigating sexuality and relationships after trauma is retraining your brain, teaching your brain that I know this looks similar, but this is not the same situation. I know this looks like poison, but it's actually chocolate, and we like chocolate. Chocolate is good. Chocolate is enjoyable. So part of it is, or part of the challenge is there's no way to teach your brain this without experiencing the uncomfortable experience. That's how you teach your brain the difference between uncomfortable and unsafe. So, for example, if someone hugging you from behind is a trigger because it reminds you of a previous experience that was traumatic, there is no way to retrain your body your body and brain that this is a safe experience without eventually experiencing that hug from behind. That doesn't mean we have to start there. Maybe it starts with, okay, it's someone that I really trust. Let me just get used to maybe I'm facing a wall and they're standing behind me. Even that of like, whew, they could come up and hug me from behind, and I don't know when that's happening. Like that kind of gradual exposure, gradual teaching that these similar circumstances don't have to be threatening. So it is a very gradual process of experimenting with similar situations that are safe, because then your body gets and mind gets to connect those experiences with safety instead of connecting them with pain or trauma. Are there helpful self practices to be more mindful and present before vulnerability or sexual experiences? Yes. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. But some things that I recommend is thinking about when you feel good, when you feel safe, and is that something that you can incorporate into kind of a ritual before a vulnerable or sexual experience? Are there certain songs that help you feel confident and powerful? Can you put that on the playlist? You don't even have to play it out loud. You can listen to it with your headphones in just to remind yourself, like, no, I am okay and I am safe. Is it a certain scent that helps with that? Is it a certain other like sensory device or experience that helps with that? It's going to be different for everyone, but I think that process of just reconnecting to yourself and reconnecting to what safety looks like and feels like for you is incredibly important. I saw someone say, even in knowing all of that, I still experience guilt and shame after sex. Very common experience. You are not at all alone in that because we're talking about what you know logically, versus what you feel on that visceral level. That's what's kind of fighting or competing in your brain, that logic and that visceral experience. And those visceral experiences are some tough competitors because they've developed not just over the course of your lifetime, but over the course of human evolution. Like we need to be able to feel things that viscerally because it does keep us safe. It does let us know that you don't want to mix up poison ivy and spinach when you're making a smoothie, right? Like we need those visceral experiences to keep us safe. The challenge is teaching your brain or reprogramming your brain that great skill, let's just apply that to a different context or situation. Sometimes I even tell people to thank your brain. Thank you so much for trying to keep me safe. I know that's why I'm feeling this anxiety. I know that's why this is so triggering for me because you remember when we were not safe and you don't ever want me to feel that again. Thank you so much for how much you care for me. We are safe now. We are safe in this situation. This person, this context is safe. Yeah. Let me double check. What tips do you have to start new and healthy intimate relationships? We will get there in just a moment. So I'm gonna defer that question for now. Internal family systems has been really helpful to me. I have a conversation with my parts prior to starting. I say, this is my partner that I love and cares for me. Can you, part that is scared, let me be alone with him and I will come get you when we are done. I love internal family systems. I love parts work because, again, it is acknowledging and affirming that there is a reason that those reactions and those responses are coming up because somewhere within you, you feel unsafe. It is your brain trying its best to do its job. Sometimes it gets a little overzealous because it errs on the side of caution. It would rather keep you too safe than not safe enough. Yeah. How do we allow our bodies to feel safe with someone who has broken our trust? And how do we work on feeling safe if we have never trusted anyone? Oh, great question. Because, well, I'm going to come back to that too, since we're going to talk a little more about relationships. Can y'all still hear me? I think I was having an issue with my mic. Okay. I think it fixed it. I think I bumped the cord. So since we're gonna talk about relationships, I'll come back to those couple of questions. So reclaiming intimacy, I use a analogy or comparison to a toddler learning how to walk. Just like a toddler who is learning how to walk, you need certain knowledge and skills. You need a safe environment. And you need a lot of practice and patience because a toddler learning how to walk is still figuring out like, what are these feet things and how do they work and how will using them get me from one side of the room to the other? They're developing that skill set of putting one foot in front of the other and moving forward. They need a safe environment to practice, an environment where not if when they fall, they can still be okay. To know that they have trusted members of their family or community who can catch them or comfort them if they do get hurt. And they need the room and space and opportunities to practice. And it takes a lot of patience because you do more falling than walking in the beginning. And it can feel the same when you're trying to reclaim what intimacy or sexuality looks like for you, means for you, or how that feels for you after experiencing trauma. It takes a lot of practice and patience to rebuild that trust or build it in the first place. So in terms of knowledge and skills that are helpful in this process of reclaiming intimacy, two that we'll talk about is how to identify and cope with your triggers and how to set and enforce healthy boundaries. So when it comes to identifying and coping with your triggers, again, a trigger is anything that reminds you of a previous traumatic experience and evokes a reaction in you. So it's important or helpful to kind of take some inventory. When do you notice yourself being triggered? What's involved? When do you notice yourself feeling unsafe or feeling threatened? Is it a certain environment? Is it certain sensory informations like a certain smell or a certain taste? Smell is actually the sense with the strongest capacity to become a trigger for us because it's our strongest scent. Because again, thinking about your brain prioritizing survival, if we smell fire and we're at a bonfire, okay, we can relax. If we smell fire and it's 3 a.m. and we're sleeping in our bed, we may be a little less relaxed. Or if we're about to fix a bowl of cereal, but we smell that the milk is spoiled, that helps us stay safe. So smell is a really powerful potential trigger. It could be certain tastes, certain food, certain movement, sound, touch, specific words. I will share that for me personally, a trigger that I had for a long time was a certain nickname that one of my abusers would use for me. And it took a while for me to realize, like, why do I cringe when I hear that, even on TV, even when no one's talking to me, and being able to say, oh, because for me, that represents a lack of safety. And to realize that, and doing the work to realize that that is not always the case. That is not always what that phrase means or connects to. And then the next step or the next question to explore, when you are triggered, what does it feel like? What emotions come up for you? What do you feel in your body? Where do you feel it in your body? Do you get a queasy feeling in your stomach? Do you notice your hands shaking or your voice shaking? Do you notice that you just want to be quiet or silent? How do you respond? What is your kind of typical or default stress response? What have you noticed? And then exploring what helps you cope. And what I mean by cope is like I was saying, there is no way to develop or to retrain your brain to respond to triggers differently without being exposed to them. And so when we're talking about coping, I'm talking about what helps you still maybe feel uncomfortable in this environment or in this situation, but also reminds you that you are not unsafe. For some people, it is grounding exercises. So maybe a bedroom could be a trigger for some folks. They could say, like, oh, I've experienced a lot of triggers or a lot of trauma in bedrooms. I prefer to sleep on the couch. Okay, so if you are in a bedroom, maybe a grounding exercise, like noticing things that you see in the room or smell in the room, or taking like a sensory inventory, could be a good coping skill for you, because maybe then it reminds you, yes, this is a bedroom, but this is not the bedroom that I was assaulted in. And this bedroom is safe. Here's what I have done or created or how I've decorated that reminds me that this is a safe space for me. So grounding exercises like that. For some people, movements, like it feels helpful to go for a walk or for a run or to work out and just remind themselves that just to remind themselves of that connection between their mind and their body. Art or some form of expression. Maybe it's journaling or painting or dancing or sculpture, or just something that is an outlet for you to navigate. This is how I'm feeling. This is really difficult for me. And instead of trying to ignore it or avoid it or suppress it, I'm going to sit here so that my brain knows we can survive this, that this is uncomfortable and it is not unsafe. Now, this is different, of course, if we are talking about an actual unsafe situation. I am not saying that if, for example, in a situation where somebody has broken your trust or is currently breaking your trust, that may genuinely be an unsafe situation. I am talking about a situation where you are able to logically know I am not unsafe right now, and this resembles a time or a situation where I was. There are all sorts of like breathing exercises on YouTube, like some good like breath work, because part of what that does, part of that alarm system that the amygdala sets off, it's a physiological response. It's happening in your mind and it's happening in your body. It is changing the way that you're breathing. And so having the time and space to slow down and breathe more deeply and breathe more intentionally helps your brain know, oh, I'm safe. I'm safe if I have time to sit here and do this. It feels like I'm being chased by a bear. But if I was being chased by a bear, I would not have time for bubble breathing and box breathing and these sorts of things. So the fact that I have time for this, okay, this is actually helping me turn off that alarm system, helping me regulate my emotions, helping me access that prefrontal cortex part of your brain and connect it with that survival focused part of your brain. Um, so let's see. I'm gonna double check for questions before I move on from triggers because I know that that can be a challenging one for someone
Here, I
or
do
for.
have an anonymous question, if I could share that now.
Oh, yes, please.
Okay, so the question is, how common or uncommon is it to struggle with reenacting trauma by participating in BDSM, and how do you break that connection of needing that pain?
How do you break that connection of what was the last part?
Of needing that pain.
Of needing that pain. Yeah, there is actually a lot more than it used to be. Research about the benefits of kink in BDSM for trauma survivors because it is a flip on power. It is a reversal of power, and it can allow folks to feel more empowered in their sexual experiences. One thing I always say about like the BDSM community is they have the manual on consent and aftercare, which I think are incredibly important to trauma survivors. Everything is discussed in detail, and everyone knows exactly what they're consenting to. And so when you say struggle with reenacting trauma, if I was your therapist, I would have more questions about what that looks like. Like in these scenes, are you reenacting being in the more submissive or victim role or in the more powerful role? Because I could see potential benefits to either of those. And I can also understand how that could feel challenging or harmful for some folks. How to cope with or with needing that pain. I, well, my first question would be, do you struggle with this because it doesn't align with your value system or what you think sex or pleasure should look and feel like, or because you worry that other people might feel that way? Are you worried that if you do get some sort of pleasure or enjoyment out of a situation that is even remotely connected to trauma that you've experienced, that that would be seen as a bad thing or a negative thing? Because I think that's like I gave the example of folks who like I really like this particular sex act, but I also know the first time I was exposed to it was when I was sexually assaulted. Is that the only reason why I like it? Is it a bad thing that I like it? What do I do with that? And I am of the opinion that if it's enjoyable, I only have two rules when it comes to sex, and that's consent and pleasure. If everyone is consenting to what's happening and it's enjoyable, I don't see an issue. Now, if this is something that is not enjoyable for you, then we would need to have some further conversation about what we want to do about that. But I don't think that there's anything necessarily wrong with finding pleasure in something that was once harmful or traumatic for you. I heard an expression that sometimes you have to go back you have to go laugh in the places where you've cried. I think that that could be a form of that rewiring or that reprogramming that in one context, this was not pleasurable, this was not safe. In this context, in a more controlled environment, as someone mentioned in the comments, this can be safe and enjoyable. Now, if it's not safe and enjoyable for you, let me know. We're having a different conversation. But if it is, I don't necessarily know that that's something that needs to change.
So
Yeah.
can you expand a little about if it is not enjoyable?
Yeah. Now, if it is not enjoyable, then as I said, I only have two rules for my clients when it comes to sex, and that's consent and pleasure. And so I never want to encourage someone to engage in acts that is not pleasurable or enjoyable for them. And maybe that's where the part where they said, when it how to what was the last part about like not wanting to need that pain
Yeah, how to break the connection of needing that pain.
of needing that pain. Yeah. Well, I would think about what does that pain do for you? What purpose is it serving? How is it helping you? It's helping you in some way, even if it's a way you would prefer that it's not. And can we replicate that effect? Can we replicate that feeling? Could it be, um, I feel like I have more control over the outcome of this experience now. And so that's why it's so hard for me to break this connection, because I need that feeling of being in control and being empowered that I didn't have before. Okay, when else do you feel confident? When else do you feel empowered? When else do you feel in control of what's happening with your body or to your body? Because to just remove something isn't necessarily as helpful as replacing something, because you might still have that ultimate desire, and the desire itself may not be harmful, but maybe the way that you figured out how to meet that need or desire, you're realizing is now harmful to you, or you don't want to engage in it in that way anymore. And so how can we get that same need met just in a different way? We need calcium. Sometimes we get that from ice cream. Sometimes we get it from vitamins, right? Like you might say, I don't want to eat ice cream every day for my calcium, but I'm willing to take a vitamin every day. And so if this is no longer an enjoyable way for you to meet that need, let's explore other ways to still meet that need. Yeah. Were there any other questions about triggers before we talk about boundaries? If so, y'all feel free to drop them in the chat and I'll get to them as soon as I can. And I did see someone messaged about a copy of the slides. I believe everyone who registered will get a copy of the slides in the audio recordings, right?
Correct. Yes.
Okay. Okay. Um, so setting and enforcing healthy boundaries. I love, love, love talking about boundaries, because I think it's one of those things that gets misunderstood and misconstrued so often. And the importance of boundaries when we're talking about trauma and sexuality, this is in part an answer to the question about, when someone has broken your trust, or you haven't been able to trust before and you're trying to build that maybe even for the first time. Boundaries are a super helpful and important part of that process. So first, I told y'all I'm big on definitions. So boundaries are the limits we set for ourselves in relationships. The key words here is for ourselves. Boundaries are not rules or demands about other people's behavior. Don't talk to me like that is not a boundary. You better be in this house by 11 p.m. is not a boundary. If you speak to me that way, I will leave, or I will end this phone call, is a boundary. If you arrive home after 11 p.m., you will find the door already locked. I will lock the door at 11 p.m. every night. That is a boundary. It is about what you will do or will not do, how you want to be treated, or how you will respond to how you were treated. We can set boundaries around, like physical boundaries around touch or our physical space. We can set sexual boundaries. This is what I'm comfortable with. This is what I'm not. This is who I have, who I don't. Sorry, I keep bumping my microphone cord. Material boundaries. I will loan someone $20, but not 2,000. I lend these books from my personal library, but not these other ones, because those are more special to me. Our time. Here's when I'm available to meet. Here's when I'm available to babysit. Here's when I'm available for dates. Here's when I'm not. So we can set boundaries in different areas of our lives, and we can set different types of boundaries. So at our extremes, at one extreme, we have boundaries that are rigid. And I liken these to a brick wall. There is no getting through. There is no give. There is no negotiation. There is no exchange permitted. It is just a brick wall. We can set rigid boundaries out of protection, out of a need or desire to protect ourselves or to keep ourselves safe. If I just don't let anyone get close, then no one can hurt me or harm me or disappoint me. And so I'll just cut everyone off. I will just isolate myself. Don't talk to me. Don't come looking for me. My boundaries are rigid. You can only call me between 11 a.m. and 11:05. If you call me at 11:06, that's it. You're blocked or you're cut off, right? That's an example of rigid boundaries. On our other extreme, we have porous boundaries. So this is like, just think of a bunch of holes in something. I was gonna use like different pictures, but I can't remember what it's called, but like where a bunch of holes gives you the creeps. I didn't want to do that to myself or anyone else. So just pretend this example has multiple holes in it. That's an example of porous boundaries. There's no safeguards, there's no limits, there's no restrictions. It's uh I can loan you I can loan you $20. Oh, you took $200 out my purse. Well, that's okay. I guess that's what you really needed. Or, yes, I know. I have asked you not to call me after 9 p.m. because I'm sleeping. It's okay that you always call at 2 a.m. Like, at least you're calling, at least you want to talk to me. That's an example of porous boundaries. Healthy boundaries I liken to a gate. So there is some security, there are some controls, there are some limits. It's not just unlimited access, and it's also not entirely restricted access. So it's more, there's some flexibility, there's some acknowledgement of humanness and human error that can arise, those sorts of things, but it's still saying, here's how I will respond in certain situations. So again, if you speak to me that way again, I will end this phone call. As an example of healthy boundaries. I have asked you not to come up and hug me from behind. That is very scary for me. If you continue to do that, I'm not going to be able to be in a relationship with you. I get it. You don't like wearing condoms. However, that's really important to me. And so if you can't agree to wearing condoms during sex, I'm not going to be sexually active with you. As examples of healthy boundaries, it is about my actions, what I'm going to do or not do. And this takes developing some skills, especially if you have had your trust broken, whether by someone you're currently partnered with or in the past, to understand what are my boundaries and to be able to communicate those to other people. So I always tell folks, if you're trying to communicate a boundary and you start the sentence with you, we're probably not headed in the direction that you want to be headed in. And if it is about what someone else is going to do or not going to do, we're setting more rules or demands versus boundaries. And so really thinking about what is important to me in feeling safe sexually or safe in a relationship, and how can I communicate that through my boundaries. Again, it takes time, it takes practice. It is a skill, but the good thing about skills is that they can be learned and developed. I'm gonna keep going just because I just took a look at the time and I want to make sure I get to everything. I also said that just like a toddler learning to walk, you also need a safe environment, and that is physical and emotional safety. So again, thinking about what in my environment helps me feel safe, or what in my environment is contributing to my unsafety. Do you have mementos related to your trauma or someone who has harmed you in the past in a space that you're trying to cultivate safety? Do we want to remove that? Does it feel unsafe for you having your bed face a certain direction? Can we rearrange that? Emotional safety as well, developing that trust, practicing that communication, being partnered with people who do value you and respect you and communicate that to you in the ways that they're treating you. That it doesn't mean, excuse me, it doesn't mean that the relationship is perfect. That's not necessarily what emotional safety is about, but it is safe enough to take a risk or to be vulnerable, because this process is so risky and is so vulnerable. And it's important that you have that emotional safety, whether in partners, in your community of friends or loved ones, where you can talk about what you're feeling and what you're needing. Um, and the last thing I mentioned was practice and patience. So what in the world are we practicing? Two things: practicing pursuing pleasure and practicing intimate connection. So when it comes to pursuing pleasure, I don't mean only sexual pleasure. Pleasure is available to you in so many non-sexual ways. Where are the places that you enjoy being, where you feel happy and carefree and that you enjoy? What are the sensory experiences that you enjoy? Are there certain scents that just feel like home and comfort to you? Maybe it's lavender. For me, it's vanilla. I love vanilla scented anything. Like that is just such a comforting scent to me. And it was like a game changer when I was like, I can wear perfume just going to bed. Like there's no rule that says when you wear perfume, it has to be when you're leaving your house. I like going to bed smelling good. That's a good enough reason to do it. What are the things you like to do? Is it reading? Is it traveling? Is it working out? Is it painting? Notice I didn't say pursuing perfection. But these do not have to be things that you master. These do not have to be things that you're good at. You just have to enjoy it. You can enjoy karaoke. You don't have to be like, oh, I'm a great and wonderful singer. No, do you like it? Great. That's what karaoke is for. So being intentional about pursuing pleasure and practicing pursuing pleasure because you may have convinced yourself that pleasure is not available or accessible to you. And so you have to purposely practice pursuing pleasure in your everyday life. One of my things is I love a hot breakfast. It doesn't have to be pancakes and eggs and grits and bacon every day, but I like my breakfast hot. So I budget time in my morning to have a hot breakfast every day because it just starts my day off beautifully. So just thinking about where can I be intentional about pursuing more pleasure. And then also practicing intimate connection. That is connecting with yourself, connecting with your body. I put in parentheses because maybe you're reconnecting with your body, but maybe you're making that connection for the first time. Maybe you've never really thought much about, what your body looks like or feels like or enjoys. Can we take some intentional time to discover that? Self-pleasure and self-care. Yes, that self-pleasure might be sexual. It might be, exploring what is sexually exciting or arousing for you. It also might be exploring some of those other things that you enjoy and maybe even doing those things by yourself. Like, I want to go see this movie. I'm not waiting for anyone else to be available. I'm going to go see it by myself. Taking care of yourself, self-care. It could be anything from basic hygiene of, you know what? I like how it feels when my hair is washed. So I'm going to wash my hair it could run the gamut from that to luxury spa treatments. That is not all that self-care is, but that could be a part of your self-care. It may be, you know what, let me eat multiple meals a day because I notice I'm not as tired and I'm not as irritable when I eat regularly. And I deserve to have a peaceful day. So let me take care of myself in that way. Open communication may or may not involve disclosing about your trauma experiences with a partner, but it would likely involve communicating what your boundaries are, what you enjoy, what you don't enjoy. And again, you might be discovering this for the first time in real time, and that's okay. That's the importance of that physically and emotionally safe environment because there will be mistakes. There will be times that you fall down, so to speak, and communicating about that openly is a part of practicing that intimate connection. I encourage everyone to go slow. There's no rush, there's no hurry. Again, if one of your triggers is being hugged from behind, you don't have to dive into the deep end and say, okay, I'm going to ask my partner to randomly 10 times a day hug me from behind. And hopefully that'll help me get over this trigger. Would not recommend doing it that way. Like we can do this slowly, we can do this gradually. There is no timeline for this and healing is not a linear process. And so, there's no shame in 6 months ago I was okay with this thing, but I feel like now this is really hard for me and I need to start back at the beginning. Great, let's do that if that's what it takes, because that's also demonstrating some open communication, some self-awareness. That's you taking care of yourself and recognizing when you need something different and prioritizing pleasure and connection, especially over things like orgasm or some version of perfection. Again, my two rules for sex is consent and pleasure. Is this enjoyable for you? Is this helping you feel more connected to your partner? Even if it's like, wow, I've been working myself up to, feeling safe having sex again, and I'm not there yet. Fine. Does it feel safe for y'all to cuddle on the couch and watch a movie? Because that's pleasure and connection. If that is the priority, it gives space for other forms of pleasure and connection to arise out of that more organically, as opposed to I got to dive into whatever I think the end goal is supposed to be. Um, And so I was going to pause and check in for questions again. And I can still do that, but I did want to share a couple of things with you all. First, I do offer different therapy groups that I thought might be helpful based on the context of our conversation. So one is called Strength and Stories. It's an 8-week group that uses narrative therapy, which is all about the stories that you tell yourself about yourself or that you believe about yourself. And this group is specifically for trauma survivors. And then Desire Mind is all about it's all for women with low sexual desire, and it's about mindfulness and how mindfulness can help with low desire. And then the last one, Rainbow Sanctuary, is for queer and trans folks of faith. I also am piloting, we'll see if I keep it around, a book club that will start in May. So the first QR code under the groups is to join the interest list. If you're interested in learning more or possibly joining any of these groups, you can scan that and complete that interest form, and I would follow up with you from there. And then if you want to join the book club, there actually is a poll open right now to select the like trial book for May. And so that poll will close on, I think, Sunday. So Saturday or Sunday. So if you're interested in joining any of these things, they're the QR codes. And I can also send you the links directly so that you can send it out with the slides to folks. And then I just wanted to share my contact information again. If you are interested in connecting with me outside of this, there's my website, there's my email, my social media. Email is the quickest or easiest way to get a hold of me, because if you call, I have to wait until I have a free time to respond to call you back or listen to a voicemail. I can respond to an email pretty quickly between sessions. So that is the quickest or easiest way to reach me. Sorry, I kind of flew through the end of that. We were having such a good conversation about some of the questions. I don't know if we have time to take any more questions, or you are welcome to email me your questions and I will respond to you directly if that's easier as well.
Thank you, Ceara. That was amazing. You unpacked so much in such a short amount of time. I know
I
I
know.
learned a lot, so I really do appreciate you leading this conversation. Um,
Glad to.
yeah, I see a lot of thank you in the chats. Really appreciate you
Yeah.
and loved your style. So
Yeah.
everyone, I will be collecting the audio recordings and the slide decks. We have one more session left in 2 weeks. That's going to be around the intersection of substance use and sexual trauma. And then after that session, I'll be putting everything together in one email to all our registrants. So please do expect that. Um, but in the meantime, Ceara, if you want to shoot me over these links, I think these are great. I know you're starting the book club or one of the groups in May, so I'll get that sent out earlier.
Okay.
But yeah, everyone else, thank you so much for joining and sticking around. And hopefully we'll see you in April 25th for our next session to close out our series. And that is it for today. Have a wonderful
Thank you.
weekend.
Have a good weekend.
Bye-bye.